The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Roosevelt Elementary School as 8-year-old Maya walked through the front doors, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. Like every other Tuesday, she was looking forward to art class later that day. Her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had promised they would be painting flowers, and Maya had been thinking about what colors to use since yesterday. Maya's mom had dropped her off early that morning, just like always. Before getting out of the car, her mom had reminded her to be good, listen to her teacher, and remember that she loved her. Maya had given her mom a quick hug and run toward the school building, excited about the day ahead. She had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday would become anything but ordinary. In her third-grade classroom, Maya took her usual seat near the window. She liked sitting there because she could see the playground and sometimes watch the birds that landed on the fence. The classroom was buzzing with the usual morning energy as 23 kids settled into their desks, pulling out homework and chatting about what they did the night before. Mrs. Peterson started the day with math, which wasn't Maya's favorite subject. She preferred reading and art, subjects where she could use her imagination. Numbers felt confusing sometimes, especially word problems that seemed to twist her thoughts around. As she stared at the worksheet in front of her, the numbers seemed to dance around the page. She tried to focus, but her mind kept wandering to the window where she could see clouds moving across the sky. "Maya, are you paying attention?" Mrs. Peterson's voice brought her back to reality. Maya nodded quickly and looked down at her worksheet. She had only finished 2 problems while other kids were already on problem number 7. The pressure to catch up made her feel anxious, and she started tapping her pencil against her desk without realizing it. The tapping sound annoyed the boy sitting next to her, Tommy, who was trying to concentrate on his own work. "Stop that," he whispered, giving Maya an irritated look. Maya didn't hear him at first because she was still lost in thought, trying to figure out if 12 apples minus 5 apples really did equal 7 apples, and why anyone would need to know that anyway. "Maya, stop tapping," Tommy said a little louder this time. Maya looked at him confused. She hadn't realized she was making noise. "Sorry," she whispered back, putting her pencil down. But within a few minutes, her nervous energy made her start fidgeting again, this time bouncing her leg under the desk. Mrs. Peterson noticed the movement and the whispering between the 2 students. She had been teaching for 15 years and knew that sometimes kids just needed to move around. "Maya, would you like to step outside for a moment and take a deep breath?" she offered kindly. Maya shook her head. She didn't want to leave the classroom because she was already behind on her math work. The morning continued with Maya struggling to focus. During reading time, she was supposed to be reading quietly at her desk, but her mind kept drifting. She started drawing small flowers in the margins of her book, thinking about the art class later. The drawings were actually quite good for an 8-year-old, showing real creativity and attention to detail. When lunchtime arrived, Maya felt relieved to get away from the academics for a while. She sat with her friends and ate the sandwich her mom had packed, along with her favorite cookies. The cafeteria was loud and chaotic, filled with the voices of hundreds of children all talking at once. Maya and her friends talked about their plans for recess and what they hoped to do in art class. After lunch, the real problems began. The class was working on a group project about animals, and Maya was assigned to work with 3 other students, including Tommy from her math class earlier. The project required them to research different animals and create a poster together. Maya was excited about this because she loved learning about animals, especially dolphins. However, the group couldn't agree on which animals to include on their poster. Maya wanted to research dolphins, but another student wanted to focus on lions. Tommy thought they should do birds, while the 4th member of the group wanted to research elephants. What started as a simple disagreement began to grow into something bigger. "We should do dolphins because they're the smartest animals," Maya said, getting more passionate about her choice. "They can recognize themselves in mirrors and they have their own language." "That's stupid," Tommy replied. "Birds are way cooler because they can fly. Dolphins just swim around all day." Maya felt hurt by Tommy's comment. Being called stupid was something that always upset her, especially when she was trying to share something she found interesting. "That's not true," she said, her voice getting louder. "Dolphins are amazing and you don't know anything about them." The disagreement continued to escalate, with each child becoming more stubborn about their choice. Mrs. Peterson was helping another group across the classroom and didn't immediately notice the growing tension at Maya's table. The voices got louder as each student tried to convince the others why their animal choice was the best. Maya stood up from her chair, feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. She wasn't used to arguing with her classmates, and the stress of the morning's math problems combined with this disagreement was making her feel anxious and upset. "Fine, I don't want to be in this stupid group anyway," she said, crossing her arms and turning away from the table. This was the moment when Mrs. Peterson looked over and saw Maya standing up, clearly upset, while her group members looked frustrated. In any normal situation, this would have been handled with a simple conversation, maybe moving Maya to a different group or taking a few minutes to help the students work through their disagreement. These kinds of conflicts happened every day in elementary schools across the country, but Mrs. Peterson had stepped out of the classroom to make copies for the next lesson, leaving a substitute teacher in charge. The substitute, who didn't know Maya or understand her personality, saw a student who appeared to be disrupting the class and refusing to participate in the group work. From across the room, it looked like Maya was being defiant and causing problems for her classmates. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She wasn't trying to cause trouble. She was just frustrated and didn't know how to handle the situation. At 8 years old, she didn't have the communication skills to express her feelings in a way that adults would understand. All she knew was that she felt overwhelmed, misunderstood, and upset. The substitute teacher approached Maya's table, not realizing that what she was seeing was a normal childhood disagreement that had gotten a little heated. To her, it looked like a behavioral problem that needed immediate attention. She didn't know that Maya was usually a well-behaved student who rarely caused any trouble in class. As Maya stood there with tears in her eyes, feeling frustrated and misunderstood, she had no idea that the next few hours would change her life forever. She was just an 8-year-old girl having a bad day at school, the kind of day that thousands of children experience every single day. The only difference was what happened next. This was the moment when a simple childhood disagreement began to transform into something much bigger and more serious, setting off a chain of events that would involve school administrators, police officers, and ultimately, Maya's own mother arriving at the school in her police uniform, not knowing that her daughter was at the center of it all. The substitute teacher, Ms. Williams, had only been working at Roosevelt Elementary for 3 weeks. She was still learning the school's policies and trying to figure out how each teacher handled different situations. When she saw Maya standing up at her desk, clearly upset and refusing to sit back down, she felt uncertain about what to do next. Ms. Williams approached Maya's table with what she thought was a calm voice. "Maya, I need you to sit down and work with your group," she said. But Maya was too overwhelmed to respond appropriately. The 8-year-old was still thinking about being called stupid and feeling like nobody understood why dolphins were so interesting and important. "I don't want to work with them anymore," Maya said, her voice shaky with emotion. "They're being mean to me." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying not to let the other kids see her crying. Ms. Williams didn't know Maya's history or personality. She didn't know that Maya was usually cooperative and rarely caused problems. She didn't know that Maya's mom always said her daughter was sensitive and needed a little extra patience sometimes. All Ms. Williams saw was a student who seemed to be refusing to follow directions. "Maya, you need to sit down right now," Ms. Williams said, her voice becoming more firm. She was trying to maintain control of the classroom, but she was also feeling stressed because she wasn't sure how to handle the situation. Maya looked around the classroom and noticed that other students were starting to stare at her. She felt embarrassed and frustrated. The attention made her feel worse, not better. Instead of sitting down, she took a step back from her desk. "I want to go to the bathroom," she said, which was her way of trying to escape from a situation that felt too overwhelming. Ms. Williams interpreted this as defiance. In her limited experience with classroom management, she thought Maya was trying to avoid doing her work and was being disruptive to the other students. "No, you may not go to the bathroom right now. You need to sit down and do your assignment." Maya felt trapped. She didn't understand why the adult wouldn't let her leave when she was feeling so upset. At 8 years old, she didn't have the words to explain that she needed a break to calm down. Instead, she just stood there, feeling more anxious with each passing moment. The situation continued for several more minutes, with Ms. Williams asking Maya to sit down, and Maya either not responding or saying she didn't want to. Other students in the class were getting distracted by what was happening, turning to look at Maya instead of focusing on their own work. Finally, Ms. Williams decided she needed help. She pressed the button on the classroom intercom that connected her directly to the main office. "I need assistance in room 12, she said into the small speaker. "I have a student who is refusing to follow directions." In the main office, Principal Davis heard the call and sighed. It had already been a busy day with 2 other classroom disruptions, a parent complaint about the cafeteria food, and a broken water fountain that was flooding the hallway. She looked at her assistant, Mrs. Chen, who was handling phone calls from parents. "I'll go check on room 12, Principal Davis said, grabbing her radio and walking toward the classroom. She had been working in elementary education for 12 years and had seen every type of situation imaginable. Most of the time, these classroom conflicts could be resolved with a simple conversation and maybe a cooling-off period. When Principal Davis arrived at the classroom, she found Maya still standing by her desk, now clearly crying, while Ms. Williams looked frustrated and unsure of what to do next. The other students were trying to work, but many of them kept looking over at Maya with curiosity and concern. "What's going on here?" Principal Davis asked quietly, trying to assess the situation. Ms. Williams explained that Maya was refusing to do her group work and wouldn't sit down when asked. She described Maya as being disruptive and defiant, though she didn't mention the original disagreement about animals or the fact that Maya had been called stupid by her classmate. Principal Davis looked at Maya, who was small for her age and clearly upset. "Maya, can you tell me what's wrong?" she asked in a gentle voice. Maya tried to explain through her tears. "Tommy said my idea was stupid and I don't want to work with them anymore. They're being mean to me and I just want to go home." This should have been the moment when an experienced educator recognized that Maya was having an emotional reaction to being hurt by her classmates. A simple solution might have been to move Maya to a different group, give her a few minutes to calm down, or call her mother to discuss the situation. But Principal Davis was under pressure from the school district to reduce classroom disruptions and maintain order. The district had recently implemented new policies about handling behavioral issues, emphasizing the importance of not letting small problems become bigger ones. There had been several meetings about maintaining classroom control and ensuring that students learned to follow directions. "Maya, I understand you're upset, but you still need to follow your teacher's instructions," Principal Davis said. "I need you to sit down and work with your group, or I'll have to call your mother to come pick you up." The mention of calling her mother made Maya more upset, not because she was afraid of getting in trouble, but because she didn't want her mom to have to leave work. Maya knew her mom worked as a police officer and that her job was important. She didn't want to cause problems for her mom. "Please don't call my mom," Maya said, crying harder now. "I'll try to work with them, but they're being mean to me." Principal Davis made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time, but would prove to be a turning point in this situation. "Maya, I need you to come with me to the office so we can talk about this calmly," she said. Maya didn't want to leave the classroom because she felt like she was in trouble, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. "I don't want to go to the office," she said, backing away from Principal Davis. This response triggered something in Principal Davis's mind about the district's new policies regarding student compliance. The training she had received emphasized that when students refused direct instructions from administrators, it could escalate into bigger behavioral problems. The district had made it clear that these situations needed to be handled firmly and quickly. Principal Davis reached for her radio. "I need the resource officers to come to room 12, she said. "I have a student who is refusing to comply with administrator instructions." Maya heard the word officers and felt confused and scared. She didn't understand why police needed to be called when all she had done was get upset about a group project. She looked around the classroom and saw her classmates staring at her with wide eyes. Some of them looked scared too. "Why are you calling police?" Maya asked, her voice small and frightened. "I didn't do anything bad. I just got upset, but the call had already been made." Somewhere else in the building, 2 school resource officers received the message that their assistance was needed in room 12 for a non-compliant student. They didn't know that the student was 8 years old, that she was upset about being called stupid by a classmate, or that she was scared and confused about why adults were treating her like she had done something wrong. The officers began walking toward room 12, their heavy boots echoing in the hallway. They were trained to respond to behavioral incidents at the school, but their training focused more on containing situations than on understanding the emotional needs of young children. Maya stood in the classroom, tears streaming down her face, not understanding why a simple disagreement about animals had led to police being called. She just wanted to go home to her mom, not knowing that in a few hours, her mom would indeed come to the school, but not in the way Maya was hoping for. The stage was set for a confrontation between a frightened 8-year-old girl and 2 adult police officers, in a situation that should never have required law enforcement involvement in the first place. Officer Martinez had been working as a school resource officer for 2 years. He genuinely liked working with kids, and had chosen this assignment because he wanted to make a positive difference in young people's lives. Most days, his job involved talking to students about safety, helping with traffic during pickup time, and occasionally dealing with minor issues like lost backpacks or playground disputes. His partner for the day was Officer Johnson, who was newer to school assignments but had several years of experience in regular patrol work. They both received the call from Principal Davis at the same time over their radios. Room 12, non-compliant student, administrator requesting assistance. The 2 officers looked at each other as they walked down the hallway toward the classroom. "Probably just need to have a conversation with some kid who's acting up," Officer Martinez said. He had handled dozens of these calls, and usually they were resolved quickly once a uniformed officer talked to the student about the importance of listening to teachers. When they arrived at room 12, they could see through the door's window that there was a small crowd gathered. Principal Davis, the substitute teacher Ms. Williams, and now the school counselor Mr. Thompson were all standing around one desk. Between them, barely visible, was Maya. Officer Martinez knocked on the door and entered the classroom. The first thing he noticed was how young Maya looked. She was tiny compared to the adults surrounding her, and she was crying quietly while hugging herself. This wasn't what he had expected when he heard non-compliant student. "What's the situation?" Officer Johnson asked Principal Davis, pulling out a small notepad as if he was taking a report about a serious incident. Principal Davis explained that Maya had been disrupting class, refusing to do her work, and wouldn't follow instructions from either the teacher or herself. She mentioned that Maya had refused to come to the office when asked, which she described as defiant behavior. Officer Martinez looked at Maya, who seemed more scared than defiant. "Hey there," he said, trying to use a friendly voice. "What's your name?" Maya looked up at the tall man in uniform and felt her heart beating faster. She had never been this close to a police officer before, except when her mom was in uniform at home. But her mom's uniform felt safe and familiar. These officers felt big and intimidating. "Maya," she whispered, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "Maya, that's a pretty name," Officer Martinez continued. "Can you tell me why you're not listening to your teacher today?" Maya tried to explain about the group project and how Tommy had called her idea stupid. But between her tears and her anxiety, the words came out jumbled and unclear. To the adults listening, it sounded like excuses and rambling, rather than a legitimate explanation of what had upset her. "Maya, your teacher and your principal are just trying to help you learn," Officer Johnson said, his voice more stern than his partner's. "When adults give you instructions, you need to follow them. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, but she still felt confused about why police officers were talking to her about schoolwork. She looked around the classroom and saw that her classmates were all staring at her. Some looked scared, some looked curious, but none of them looked like they understood what was happening either. "Can I go back to my seat now?" Maya asked quietly. She just wanted this attention to stop and for everyone to leave her alone. "First, you need to apologize to your teacher and your principal for not listening," Officer Martinez said. He thought he was being reasonable and giving Maya a chance to make things right. But Maya felt like she was being asked to apologize for being hurt and upset. She didn't understand why she should say sorry when she felt like the adults hadn't listened to her side of the story. "But they were mean to me first," she said, her voice getting a little stronger. Principal Davis interpreted this as continued defiance. "Maya, you're not taking responsibility for your behavior," she said. "These officers came here to help you understand why you need to follow rules." Maya felt frustrated that no one was hearing what she was trying to say. She wasn't trying to break rules or cause trouble. She was just upset and didn't know how to handle her feelings. "I want to call my mom," she said, which seemed like a reasonable request to her. "Your mom is at work," Principal Davis replied. "We need to handle this situation here at school." Maya didn't know that her mom was actually just a few miles away, finishing up her morning patrol shift. She didn't know that her mom would have dropped everything to come help her daughter work through this confusing and scary situation. Officer Johnson was starting to feel impatient. He had other duties to attend to, and this situation seemed like it should have been resolved by now. Maya, we need you to sit down at your desk and do your schoolwork. Can you do that for us? Maya looked at her desk where her group project materials were still scattered around. The thought of going back to work with Tommy and the other kids who had been arguing with her made her feel sick to her stomach. I don't want to work with them, she said. They don't like my ideas. This response seemed unreasonable to the adults who saw it as a child refusing to participate in a normal school activity. They didn't understand that Maya felt rejected and hurt, and that forcing her back into the same situation without addressing the underlying problem would only make things worse. Maya, you don't get to choose whether or not you do your schoolwork, Officer Martinez said, his friendly tone starting to fade. Your teacher gave you an assignment and you need to complete it. Maya felt cornered and overwhelmed. She was surrounded by 4 adults who all seemed to be telling her that her feelings didn't matter, and that she needed to do something that felt impossible to her right now. She took a step backward toward the classroom window. Maya, I need you to step forward and go to your desk, Officer Johnson said, his voice becoming more commanding. But Maya couldn't move forward. Every instinct in her 8-year-old body was telling her that this situation felt dangerous and wrong. She didn't have the words to explain that she felt threatened and scared, so she just stood frozen by the window. Officer Johnson interpreted Maya's stillness as deliberate noncompliance. In his training, he had learned that when subjects refused direct commands, the situation could escalate quickly. He didn't consider that Maya might be frozen with fear rather than choosing to be defiant. Maya, this is your last warning, Officer Johnson said. You need to move to your desk right now or we're going to have to help you move. Maya looked at the officer with confusion and terror. She didn't understand what help you move meant, but it sounded scary. She pressed herself against the window, wishing she could disappear or that her mom would somehow appear to help her. When Maya didn't move within the next few seconds, Officer Johnson decided that action was necessary. He had been trained to gain compliance from non-cooperative individuals, but his training hadn't included specific techniques for frightened children who were having emotional overwhelm. Okay, Maya, we're going to help you get to where you need to be, Officer Johnson said, stepping toward her. Maya panicked. She didn't want these big strangers to touch her. She tried to move away from Officer Johnson, but there was nowhere to go with the window behind her and the adults in front of her. No, please, she said, her voice small and scared. I want my mom. Officer Johnson reached out to take Maya's arm, intending to guide her toward her desk. But Maya, acting on pure instinct, tried to pull her arm away from his grasp. She wasn't trying to fight or attack anyone. She was just scared and trying to get away from a situation that felt threatening. This is when everything went wrong. Officer Johnson felt Maya pull against his grip and interpreted it as active resistance. In that moment, his training kicked in, and he forgot that he was dealing with a frightened child who weighed less than 70 pounds and was having the worst day of her young life. What happened next would haunt everyone involved and change Maya's life forever. Officer Lisa Chen was finishing her morning patrol when the emergency call came over her radio. She was parked outside the local coffee shop, filling out paperwork from a minor traffic accident she had handled earlier. It had been a quiet morning, the kind she usually enjoyed because it meant everyone in her district was safe and things were running smoothly. All units, we have a situation at Roosevelt Elementary School, the dispatcher announced. Officers requesting additional backup for an incident involving a juvenile. Any available units, please respond. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Roosevelt Elementary was her daughter's school. Maya was in 3rd grade there, probably sitting in her classroom right now working on math or reading. Lisa grabbed her radio immediately. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Can you provide more details about the situation at Roosevelt Elementary? I have a child enrolled there. There was a pause before the dispatcher responded. Unit 47, we have limited information at this time. Officers Martinez and Johnson are on scene dealing with a non-compliant juvenile. Situation appears to be escalating. Lisa felt a cold sensation in her stomach. She knew Officers Martinez and Johnson well, had worked with both of them on various calls. They were good cops, but she also knew that sometimes situations at schools could get complicated quickly, especially when everyone was under stress. Dispatch. I'm en route to Roosevelt Elementary, Lisa said. Starting her patrol car and pulling out of the coffee shop parking lot, she told herself she was probably overreacting. There were hundreds of kids at Roosevelt Elementary, and the chances that this incident involved Maya were very small. But as she drove toward the school, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Maya had seemed a little anxious that morning when Lisa dropped her off. She had mentioned something about a group project she wasn't looking forward to, and Lisa had given her a pep talk about working well with others and asking for help if she needed it. The drive to the school usually took about 8 minutes, but Lisa made it in 5, using her lights and siren to navigate through traffic. As she pulled into the school parking lot, she could see 2 other patrol cars already there, along with what looked like an ambulance parked near the main entrance. An ambulance. Lisa's training as a police officer told her that ambulances were called when someone was hurt. Her instincts as a mother told her to run toward the school as fast as she could. Lisa parked her car and jogged toward the main entrance, her heavy-duty belt and equipment bouncing with each step. She showed her badge to the security guard and headed straight for the main office, where she hoped to get information about what was happening. The hallway seemed longer than usual as Lisa walked quickly toward the office. Students were in their classrooms, but she could sense a different energy in the building. Some teachers were standing in their doorways looking concerned and whispering to each other. When Lisa reached the main office, she found it busy with activity. Principal Davis was talking rapidly on the phone while the school secretary was filling out paperwork. The school nurse was organizing medical supplies, which made Lisa's anxiety increase even more. "Excuse me," Lisa said to the secretary, showing her badge. "I'm Officer Chen. I received a call about an incident here, and my daughter Maya is a student. Can you tell me what's happening?" The secretary looked up at Lisa with the expression that made Lisa's heart sink. It was the look people get when they have to deliver bad news and don't know how to start. "Officer Chen, you should speak with Principal Davis immediately," the secretary said quietly. She's involved in the situation." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Her daughter, her sweet 8-year-old Maya, who had never been in serious trouble in her life, was somehow at the center of whatever had required police backup and an ambulance. Principal Davis finished her phone call and approached Lisa with a serious expression. "Officer Chen, I'm glad you're here. We've had an incident involving Maya, and I think it would be best if you could take her home for the rest of the day." "What kind of incident?" Lisa asked, her voice steady despite the panic she was feeling inside. Her police training was helping her stay calm and focused, even though every parental instinct was screaming at her to find Maya immediately. Maya became disruptive during class time and was not responding to teacher directions, Principal Davis explained. Officers Martinez and Johnson were called to assist with the situation, and there was some physical contact during the attempt to gain compliance. Physical contact. Lisa's mind raced through all the possible meanings of those words. "Is Maya hurt?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "She has some minor injuries, nothing serious," Principal Davis said quickly. "The school nurse has checked her over, and she doesn't appear to need medical attention beyond basic first aid." Lisa felt angry and confused. Maya was 8 years old and weighed less than 70 pounds. What kind of situation would require 2 grown men to use physical force on her daughter? And why hadn't anyone called Lisa immediately when the problem first started? "Where is Maya now?" Lisa asked. "She's in the counselor's office with Mr. Thompson," Principal Davis replied. "She's been asking for you." Lisa followed Principal Davis down the hallway toward the counselor's office, her mind spinning with questions and concerns. She could hear her own footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway, each step bringing her closer to seeing Maya and finding out exactly what had happened. As they approached the counselor's office, Lisa could hear a small voice through the door. It was Maya, and she was crying. The sound of her daughter's tears made Lisa's chest tighten with emotion and anger. Principal Davis knocked on the door and opened it slowly. "Maya, your mom is here," she said gently. Lisa stepped into the small office and saw Maya sitting in a child-sized chair next to Mr. Thompson's desk. Her daughter's face was red and blotchy from crying, and Lisa immediately noticed a small bandage on Maya's arm and what looked like the beginning of a bruise on her shoulder. "Mommy," Maya cried out, jumping up from her chair and running toward Lisa. Lisa knelt down and wrapped her arms around Maya, holding her daughter close and feeling the trembling in her small body. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," Lisa whispered, stroking Maya's hair. As Lisa held her daughter, she looked over Maya's head at Mr. Thompson, who was watching the reunion with a troubled expression. Behind her, she could sense Principal Davis shifting uncomfortably. "Maya, can you tell me what happened today?" Lisa asked gently, pulling back to look at her daughter's face. Through her tears, Maya began to tell her story. She talked about the group project, about being called stupid, about feeling scared when the police officers came to her classroom. She described being touched and grabbed when she was trying to get away because she was frightened. As Lisa listened to her daughter's account, she felt a mixture of heartbreak and rage building inside her chest. This was her child, her innocent 8-year-old daughter, who had apparently been treated like a criminal for having an emotional reaction to a school conflict. Lisa looked at the bandage on Maya's arm and the bruise forming on her shoulder. These were not accidents or minor scrapes from playground activity. These were injuries that had been caused by adult officers using force against her child. "I want to speak with Officers Martinez and Johnson immediately," Lisa said, her voice calm but firm. Principal Davis cleared her throat. "They've already left to write their report about the incident. But Officer Chen, I want you to know that we followed all proper procedures and protocols." Lisa stood up, still holding Maya's hand. Her training as a police officer was warring with her instincts as a mother. She knew about procedures and protocols, but she also knew that something had gone very wrong here today. "I'm taking Maya home," Lisa said, "and then I'll be requesting a full investigation into what happened here." As Lisa walked out of the school with Maya beside her, she could feel her daughter's small hand gripping hers tightly. Maya was safe now, but Lisa knew that the effects of this day would last much longer than the physical injuries she could see. Lisa was a police officer who believed in law and order, who had dedicated her career to serving and protecting her community. But today, the system she served had failed to protect the most important person in her world, her own daughter. Lisa sat in her car in the school parking lot. Maya buckled into the passenger seat beside her. Her daughter had finally stopped crying, but she was staring out the window with an expression that broke Lisa's heart. It was the look of a child who had lost some fundamental sense of safety and trust in the world around her. "Mommy, why did those police officers hurt me?" Maya asked quietly, not taking her eyes off the window. "I thought police officers were supposed to help people." Lisa felt her throat tighten. This was exactly the conversation she had never wanted to have with her 8-year-old daughter. As a police officer herself, Lisa had always taught Maya to trust law enforcement, to see officers as helpers and protectors. Now Maya's entire understanding of police had been shattered in one terrible morning. "Baby, police officers are supposed to help people," Lisa said carefully. "What happened to you today was wrong. Those officers made a big mistake." Maya turned to look at her mother, confusion clear in her young eyes. "But you're a police officer and you would never hurt me." "Why did they hurt me?" Lisa didn't have a good answer for that question. She didn't understand it herself. How could two trained officers, both of whom she knew personally, end up using physical force on a scared 8-year-old girl? It went against everything she believed about proper policing and basic human decency. Instead of driving straight home, Lisa made a decision. She needed to understand exactly what had happened, and she needed to confront Officers Martinez and Johnson while the incident was still fresh. She knew they would likely be at the police station finishing their paperwork. "Maya, I need to make a quick stop at the police station," Lisa said. "You can wait in the car or you can come inside with me. What would make you feel more comfortable?" Maya considered this for a moment. "I want to stay with you," she said firmly. "I don't want to be alone right now." Lisa understood completely. After what Maya had been through, being separated from her mother probably felt frightening. "Okay, baby. You can stay right beside me." The drive to the police station took about 10 minutes. Lisa used the time to call her sergeant and report that she was bringing her daughter to the station regarding an incident that had occurred at Roosevelt Elementary. She wanted everything documented properly from the beginning. When they arrived at the station, Lisa took Maya's hand and walked through the front entrance. Several of her colleagues looked surprised to see her with Maya during school hours, especially since Maya still looked upset and had visible injuries. "Lisa, what's going on?" asked Sergeant Williams, approaching them with concern. "My daughter was involved in an incident at her school today," Lisa explained. Officers Martinez and Johnson were called to handle a situation, and Maya was injured during their response. "I need to speak with them immediately." Sergeant Williams looked down at Maya, noticing the bandage on her arm and the worried expression on her face. "Martinez and Johnson are in the report writing room," he said. "Lisa, maybe we should talk about this privately first." Lisa understood what he was suggesting, but she wasn't going to leave Maya alone again today. "Maya stays with me," she said firmly. "She's been through enough already." As they walked toward the report writing room, Lisa could feel the curious stares of other officers. News traveled fast in a police station, and she knew that word of this incident would spread quickly through the department. Officers Martinez and Johnson were sitting at computers, typing up their reports about the morning's events. When they saw Lisa walk in with Maya, both men looked uncomfortable and surprised. "Lisa," Officer Martinez said, standing up from his chair, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I bet you didn't," Lisa replied, her voice calm but with an edge that her colleagues recognized. "I understand you had an encounter with my daughter this morning." Officer Johnson remained seated, but he looked defensive. "We responded to a call about a disruptive student. We followed proper procedures for dealing with non-compliant subjects." Lisa felt Maya's hand tighten in hers at the word subjects. Her daughter wasn't a subject. She was a frightened child who had needed help, not force. "She's 8 years old," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "She weighs 68 pounds. What kind of threat could she possibly have posed that required physical force?" Officer Martinez looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Lisa, I know this is difficult because she's your daughter, but she was refusing direct orders from school administrators and officers. When a subject refuses to comply, we have to take action to maintain control of the situation." "Stop calling her a subject," Lisa said, her voice sharper now. "She's a child. She's my child. And from what I understand, she was upset about a school project and scared when 2 adult men in uniform started giving her orders." Officer Johnson finally stood up, crossing his arms defensively. "Look, Lisa, I get that you're upset because it's your kid, but we can't treat children differently just because they're young. If we let them think they can ignore authority, it sets a bad precedent." Lisa stared at Officer Johnson in disbelief. "You think an 8-year-old crying in her classroom is a threat to authority? You think the appropriate response to a scared child is physical force?" Maya had been listening to this conversation, and Lisa could see that her daughter was getting upset again. The men who had hurt her were talking about her like she wasn't even there, using words like subject and non-compliant that made her sound like a dangerous criminal instead of a little girl who had been having a bad day. "Mommy, can we go home now?" Maya asked quietly, tugging on Lisa's hand. Lisa looked down at her daughter and saw exhaustion and confusion in her young face. This confrontation wasn't helping Maya, and it was becoming clear that Officers Martinez and Johnson didn't understand the severity of what they had done. "In a minute, baby," Lisa said gently. Then she looked back at her colleagues. "I want to see your reports before they're filed. I want to see the body camera footage, if there is any. And I want to understand exactly what kind of threat assessment you made that led you to use physical force on a scared 8-year-old. Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably. "There isn't any body camera footage. We weren't wearing cameras for a school assignment like this." Lisa felt a surge of anger. Body cameras were supposed to be worn during all interactions with the public, especially ones that might involve use of force. "Why weren't you wearing cameras?" "It was just supposed to be a simple classroom management situation," Officer Johnson said. "We didn't think we'd need them for talking to a kid about homework." The irony was overwhelming. If they had thought it would just be a simple conversation, why had they ended up using physical force? And now there was no video evidence of exactly what had happened to Maya. "This conversation isn't over," Lisa said firmly. "I'm requesting a formal investigation through Internal Affairs, and I'm filing a complaint about this incident." Officer Johnson looked surprised. "Lisa, you're really going to go after fellow officers over a routine use of force? You know how this stuff works. The kid was non-compliant, we gained compliance, case closed." Lisa looked at him with disgust. "That kid is my daughter, and what you did to her was not routine, it was wrong. If you can't see the difference between policing adults and working with children, then you have no business being in schools." Maya had been watching this entire exchange, seeing her mother argue with other police officers who wore the same uniform she did. It was confusing and scary for her to see adults disagreeing so strongly about what had happened to her. As Lisa walked out of the station with Maya, she realized that this incident had created a fundamental conflict in her life. She was a police officer who believed in law and order, but she was also a mother whose child had been traumatized by the very system she served. Maya looked up at her mother as they got back in the car. "Mommy, are you in trouble now because you were mad at those officers?" Lisa buckled Maya into her seat and took a deep breath. "No, baby. I'm not in trouble. Sometimes adults have to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult." As they drove home, Lisa knew that this was just the beginning. The confrontation at the station had made it clear that some of her colleagues saw Maya as nothing more than a non-compliant subject who had been handled appropriately. But Lisa saw her daughter as a victim of excessive force, and she wasn't going to let this incident be swept under the rug. The battle lines had been drawn, and Lisa found herself on the opposite side from officers she had worked with for years. It was a lonely and frightening position, but she knew she had no choice but to fight for her daughter and for other children who might face similar situations in the future. 3 days after the incident at Roosevelt Elementary, Lisa sat across from Internal Affairs investigator Captain Rodriguez in a sterile conference room at police headquarters. Maya was at home with Lisa's mother, finally starting to show signs of her normal personality returning, though she still asked worried questions about police officers and whether they might hurt her again. Captain Rodriguez had been investigating police misconduct for over 15 years, and he had seen cases that ranged from minor policy violations to serious criminal behavior. But cases involving children were always particularly challenging, especially when the complainant was a fellow officer. "Officer Chen, I want you to know that we're taking this complaint very seriously," Captain Rodriguez said, opening a thick file folder. "I've already interviewed Principal Davis, the substitute teacher, and the school counselor. I've also spoken with several of Maya's classmates who witnessed the incident." Lisa leaned forward in her chair. "What did the children say happened?" Captain Rodriguez consulted his notes. "Their accounts are remarkably consistent. They describe Maya as being upset and crying, but not threatening or violent. Several students said they were scared when Officers Martinez and Johnson arrived because Maya seemed so frightened. One student said Maya kept asking for her mother. Hearing this made Lisa's chest tighten with emotion. She could picture her daughter surrounded by uniformed adults crying and asking for her mommy, while her classmates watched in fear and confusion. "What about the school's account?" Lisa asked. "Principal Davis maintains that proper procedures were followed," Captain Rodriguez replied. "However, there are some inconsistencies in the timeline and in the descriptions of Maya's behavior. The substitute teacher, Ms. Williams, admits she may have escalated the situation by calling for administrative help instead of trying to work with Maya directly." Captain Rodriguez pulled out a series of photographs. These are pictures of Maya's injuries, taken by the school nurse immediately after the incident. There's clear evidence of bruising on her upper arm consistent with being grabbed forcefully. There's also a scrape on her forearm that appears to have been caused by contact with a rough surface, possibly the classroom floor. Lisa looked at the photographs and felt sick. Seeing her daughter's injuries documented like evidence in a criminal case made the whole situation feel even more surreal and heartbreaking. "Have you interviewed Officers Martinez and Johnson yet?" Lisa asked. "Yes, I spoke with both of them yesterday," Captain Rodriguez said, his expression becoming more serious. "Their accounts are also consistent with each other, but they differ significantly from what the children and school staff described." Lisa waited for him to continue. "According to Martinez and Johnson, Maya was actively resisting arrest and posed a potential threat to herself and others. They claim she was trying to break classroom windows and that she attempted to strike Officer Johnson when he tried to restrain her." Lisa stared at Captain Rodriguez in disbelief. "They're claiming that my 8-year-old daughter tried to attack a grown man? That she was trying to break windows?" "That's their official statement, yes," Captain Rodriguez confirmed. "However, there are several problems with their account. First, there's no damage to any classroom windows. Second, none of the witnesses describe Maya as being violent or destructive. And third, their description of her behavior doesn't match the injury patterns we see in these photographs." Captain Rodriguez pulled out another document. There's also the issue of the missing body camera footage. Both officers admit they weren't wearing their cameras during this incident, which is a violation of department policy for any interaction that might involve use of force. Lisa felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that the investigation seemed to be uncovering the truth about what had happened, and anger that 2 officers she had worked with were apparently lying about traumatizing her child. What happens next? Lisa asked. I'm recommending that this case be referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges, Captain Rodriguez said seriously. The use of force against Maya appears to have been excessive and unjustified based on the evidence I've gathered. Lisa was shocked. She had hoped for accountability, but she hadn't expected that criminal charges might be filed against her fellow officers. I'm also recommending significant policy changes regarding police involvement in schools, Captain Rodriguez continued. This incident highlights serious problems with how we handle situations involving young children. Over the next few weeks, the investigation continued to develop. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and decided to file misdemeanor assault charges against both officers Martinez and Johnson. The news sent shockwaves through the police department and the local community. Lisa found herself in an increasingly difficult position. Some of her colleagues supported her and agreed that the officers had acted inappropriately, but others felt that she was betraying the brotherhood of law enforcement by pursuing charges against fellow officers. You're setting a dangerous precedent, Sergeant Mitchell told Lisa one day in the locker room. If cops can't back each other up, the whole system falls apart. Lisa looked at him with a mixture of sadness and determination. If the system requires me to stay quiet while officers hurt children, then maybe it needs to fall apart. The case began to attract media attention when court documents were filed. Local news reporters started calling the police department and the school district, asking questions about policies regarding children and use of force. Lisa received a call from a journalist who had covered several police misconduct cases in the past. Officer Chen, would you be willing to speak publicly about what happened to your daughter? Lisa was torn. Part of her wanted to tell Maya's story to the world, to make sure that people understood how wrong it was for police officers to use force against frightened children. But another part of her wanted to protect Maya's privacy and shield her from any additional trauma. I need to think about it, Lisa told the reporter. My primary concern is my daughter's well-being. That evening, Lisa sat with Maya on the couch reading bedtime stories together like they did every night. Maya seemed to be healing emotionally, but she still asked questions that broke Lisa's heart. Mommy, if you're a police officer and those men were police officers, why did you disagree with them? Maya asked. Lisa set down the book they had been reading. Sometimes people who have the same job don't agree about how to do it right, she explained. I think police officers should be kind and helpful, especially to children. Those men forgot that part of their job. Maya considered this for a moment. Will they remember next time? Lisa wished she could promise that this would never happen to another child, but she knew that real change would take time and effort. I'm trying to help them remember, baby. That's why we had to tell people about what happened to you. As the legal case moved forward, Lisa realized that her decision to file a complaint had started something much bigger than just seeking justice for Maya. It had opened up a conversation about how police interact with children, about accountability within law enforcement, and about the responsibility that officers have to protect the most vulnerable members of their community. The investigation had revealed not just the facts about what happened to Maya, but also systemic problems that needed to be addressed. It was going to be a long fight, but Lisa was determined to see it through, not just for her daughter, but for all the children who deserved to feel safe around the people who were supposed to protect them. The battle for accountability had begun, and there was no turning back. The news story broke on a Thursday evening during the local 6 o'clock broadcast. Lisa was cooking dinner while Maya worked on her homework at the kitchen table when they heard the familiar voice of news anchor Patricia Williams filling their living room. Tonight, we have an exclusive report about a controversial incident at Roosevelt Elementary School involving 2 police officers and an 8-year-old student. The child's mother, who is also a police officer, has filed complaints that could result in criminal charges against her colleagues. Lisa froze, her wooden spoon halfway to her mouth as she tasted the spaghetti sauce. She hadn't given permission for the story to air, but somehow the media had gotten hold of the basic facts about Maya's case. Maya looked up from her math homework. Mommy, are they talking about me? Lisa quickly grabbed the remote and turned off the television. Don't worry about it, baby. Just focus on your homework. But it was too late to shield Maya from what was happening. Within hours, the story had spread to social media, online news sites, and radio talk shows. Lisa's phone started buzzing with calls and text messages from friends, family members, and complete strangers who had opinions about the case. Some of the messages were supportive. "You're doing the right thing, Lisa. Children should never be treated like criminals." Others were hostile and accusatory. "You're a traitor to the badge." Those officers were just doing their job. By Friday morning, a small group of protesters had gathered outside Roosevelt Elementary School with signs reading, "Protect our children and no police brutality in schools." The school district was forced to increase security and send letters to parents explaining that the situation was being handled through proper legal channels. At the police station, the atmosphere was tense and divided. Officer Patricia Brooks approached Lisa as she was filling out paperwork at her desk. "Lisa, I want you to know that a lot of us support what you're doing," she said quietly. "I have kids too, and what happened to Maya was wrong. But not everyone shared that opinion." Later that same day, Lisa found herself confronted by Officer Dave Thompson in the parking lot after her shift ended. "You know what you've done, don't you?" he said angrily. "You've made every cop in this city a target. Now every time we have to deal with a difficult situation, people are going to be filming us and looking for reasons to file complaints." Lisa looked at him steadily. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Dave. Maybe we should be more careful about how we treat people, especially children." Officer Thompson shook his head in disgust. "You used to understand what it meant to back up your fellow officers. Now you're just another cop hater with a badge." These confrontations were becoming more frequent as the case gained public attention. Lisa found herself walking into rooms where conversations would suddenly stop, or overhearing whispered comments about that officer who can't control her own kid. The divide wasn't limited to the police department. The community was also split in their reactions to Maya's story. At a school board meeting the following Tuesday, parents and community members packed the auditorium to voice their opinions. Some parents supported the school's decision to call police and backed the officers' actions. "Children need to learn that there are consequences for disruptive behavior," said parent Janet Wilson. "If we don't teach them to respect authority when they're young, they'll never learn." But other parents were outraged by what had happened. "My daughter is the same age as Maya," said parent Carlos Hernandez. "The idea that police officers could hurt her for being upset about a school project is terrifying to me." Maya's teacher, Mrs. Peterson, who had been absent on the day of the incident, spoke up during the public comment period. "I've taught Maya since the beginning of the school year," she said. "She's a sweet, sensitive child who has never shown any aggressive or violent tendencies. What happened to her was completely unnecessary and traumatic." The school board ultimately voted to review their policies regarding police involvement in student discipline, but several board members expressed concern that the negative publicity was damaging the school's reputation. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations began to take notice of Maya's case. The local chapter of the NAACP reached out to Lisa, offering legal support and advocacy services. "Your daughter's case is unfortunately not unique," explained NAACP Representative Minister Davis. "We see too many instances where young children, particularly children of color, are treated as threats rather than as kids who need help." Lisa was learning that Maya's experience was part of a much larger pattern of police interactions with children in schools. Statistics showed that thousands of students were arrested or subjected to police force each year for behavior that previous generations would have handled with detention or parent conferences. A week after the news story first broke, Lisa received a phone call that surprised her. It was from Dr. Angela Roberts, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. "Officer Chen, I've been following your daughter's case in the media," Dr. Roberts said. "I'd like to offer free counseling services for Maya, and I'd also like to speak with you about the long-term effects this kind of incident can have on children." Lisa gratefully accepted the offer. Maya had been having nightmares and had become anxious around any uniformed authority figures, including security guards at the grocery store and even the crossing guard at school. During Maya's first therapy session, Dr. Roberts helped her talk about her feelings using dolls and drawings. Maya drew a picture of herself surrounded by large, dark figures, with tears coming down her face and the word "help" written in crayon at the bottom. Maya feels like the adults who were supposed to protect her instead hurt her, Dr. Roberts explained to Lisa after the session. This can have lasting effects on her ability to trust authority figures and feel safe in institutional settings like schools. The therapy sessions became a regular part of Maya's week, and slowly she began to process what had happened to her. But Lisa could see that the incident had changed her daughter in fundamental ways. Maya was more cautious, more anxious, and less trusting than she had been before. As the criminal case against officers Martinez and Johnson moved through the court system, Lisa found herself at the center of a community debate about police accountability, children's rights, and institutional responsibility. Some days, the support from community members and fellow officers kept her motivated to continue fighting for justice. Other days, the criticism and hostility made her question whether she was doing the right thing. But every night, when she tucked Maya into bed and saw the way her daughter still flinched slightly at unexpected sounds, Lisa knew she had no choice but to keep pushing forward. This wasn't just about seeking justice for one incident. It was about preventing other children from experiencing the same trauma Maya had endured. The community was divided, but Lisa's resolve remained strong. She was fighting not just for her daughter, but for every child who deserved to feel safe and protected by the adults in their lives. 8 months after the incident at Roosevelt Elementary, Lisa sat in a packed courtroom as Judge Maria Santos prepared to deliver the verdict in the case against officers Martinez and Johnson. Maya was not present, having been at school that day, but Lisa could feel her daughter's presence in every word that had been spoken during the trial. The courtroom was filled with police officers, school officials, community activists, and local residents who had followed the case closely. The divide that had emerged in the weeks after the incident was still visible, with supporters and critics of the officers sitting on opposite sides of the courtroom. Judge Santos looked at the defendants as she began to speak. This case has forced our community to confront difficult questions about the appropriate use of force, especially when dealing with children. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, I find both defendants guilty of misdemeanor assault. Lisa felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the justice system had recognized the wrong that had been done to Maya, but sadness that it had taken a criminal conviction to establish that hurting a frightened 8-year-old was inappropriate. Officers Martinez and Johnson received sentences of community service, mandatory retraining on child psychology and de-escalation techniques, and 1 year of probation. They would also be required to attend counseling sessions focused on understanding trauma and child development. Officer Martinez approached Lisa as they left the courtroom. "Lisa, I want you to know that I never intended for Maya to get hurt," he said quietly. "I've thought about that day every single day since it happened, and I wish I had handled things differently." Lisa looked at him for a long moment before responding. "I believe you didn't intend to hurt her, but the damage was done anyway. Maya still has nightmares sometimes, and she's still afraid of police officers who aren't me." Officer Martinez nodded sadly. "I have a daughter Maya's age now," he said. "I can't imagine how I would feel if someone treated her the way we treated Maya. I'm going to make sure this never happens again." The criminal case was over, but the broader impact of Maya's story was just beginning to unfold. The school district had already implemented new policies requiring that parents be contacted immediately when police are called for student behavioral issues. They also mandated that at least one trained counselor must be present during any police interaction with elementary school students. The police department had made even more significant changes. All officers assigned to schools were now required to complete specialized training in child psychology and trauma-informed policing. Body cameras became mandatory for all school-related calls, and a new protocol was established requiring supervisor approval before any use of force against children under 12 years. Old Chief of Police Robert Williams held a press conference the day after the verdict was announced. "This incident has taught us valuable lessons about our responsibility to protect all members of our community, especially our most vulnerable children," he said. "We are committed to ensuring that what happened to Maya never happens to another child in our care." Lisa had mixed feelings about these policy changes. She was glad to see reforms being implemented, but she worried that they were mostly surface level, adjustments that didn't address the deeper cultural problems within law enforcement. Her concerns were validated when she overheard conversations in the police station locker room. Some officers genuinely seemed to understand the need for change, but others were resentful about the new restrictions and training requirements. "Now we're going to need a Supervisor's permission to arrest some kid who's threatening people with a knife, she heard one officer complain. These new rules are going to get someone hurt. Lisa spoke up from across the locker room. The new rules are about making sure we don't hurt children who aren't actually threatening anyone, she said firmly. Maya wasn't threatening anyone with a knife or anything else. She was crying about a school project. The conversation highlighted the ongoing challenge of changing attitudes and culture within institutions that had operated the same way for decades. Maya continued to attend therapy with Dr. Roberts, and gradually she was healing from the trauma of her experience. She was learning to differentiate between different types of authority figures and to understand that not all police officers would treat her the way officers Martinez and Johnson had. One afternoon, about 10 months after the incident, Maya came home from school with a drawing she had made in art class. It showed a police officer helping a child who had fallen off her bicycle, with both figures smiling and the sun shining overhead. "I drew this for you, Mommy," Maya said, handing Lisa the picture. "It's how police officers should be." Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes as she looked at her daughter's artwork. It represented hope and healing, and it showed that Maya was beginning to believe, again, that police officers could be helpers and protectors. Dr. Roberts had told Lisa that children were remarkably resilient and that Maya would likely recover fully from her experience with proper support and time. The therapy sessions were already showing positive results, and Maya was displaying more of her old confidence and curiosity. But Lisa also knew that Maya would always carry some memory of that day at Roosevelt Elementary. She would probably always be more cautious around authority figures, and she might always have some anxiety about situations where she felt trapped or powerless. The broader impact of Maya's case extended far beyond their local community. Civil rights organizations had used Maya's story as an example of why police reform was necessary, particularly regarding interactions with children. Several other school districts across the state had reviewed and revised their own policies about police involvement in student discipline. Lisa had been invited to speak at law enforcement training conferences about the incident and its aftermath. She found these speaking engagements both difficult and rewarding, as she tried to help other officers understand the perspective of both a parent and a fellow law enforcement professional. "When we put on this uniform, we take an oath to serve and protect," Lisa would tell groups of officers. "That oath doesn't have an age limit. We're supposed to protect 8-year-olds just as much as we protect adults, maybe even more so because children are more vulnerable and depend on adults to keep them safe." Some officers in her audiences were receptive to her message, while others remained skeptical. But Lisa continued to speak out, because she believed that change happened one conversation at a time, one policy revision at a time, one officer at a time. At home, Maya was flourishing in her new school, where Lisa had enrolled her after deciding that returning to Roosevelt Elementary would be too traumatic. Maya's new teachers knew about her experience and were careful to create an environment where she felt safe and supported. Maya had even made new friends who didn't know about the incident, allowing her to have normal childhood experiences without being defined by what had happened to her. One evening, as Lisa was tucking Maya into bed, her daughter asked a question that surprised her. "Mommy, do you think those officers who hurt me learned their lesson?" Lisa considered her answer carefully. "I think they learned some things, baby. Officer Martinez seems to understand now that what happened was wrong. I hope that means he'll be more careful with other children." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I hope so too. I don't want other kids to feel as scared as I felt." Lisa's heart swelled with pride at her daughter's empathy and maturity. Despite everything Maya had been through, she was still concerned about other children and wanted to prevent them from experiencing similar trauma. As Lisa turned off Maya's bedroom light and walked back to her own room, she reflected on the journey they had been on together. The path from that terrible day at Roosevelt Elementary to this moment had been difficult and painful, but it had also been a journey toward justice, healing, and positive change. Lisa knew that the fight for police accountability and children's rights was far from over. There would be other cases, other children who needed advocates, and other opportunities to push for reform. But Maya's case had proven that change was possible when people were willing to speak up and demand better from their institutions. Maya was no longer just a victim of excessive force. She had become a symbol of resilience, a catalyst for reform, and a reminder that every child deserves to be treated with dignity and respect by the adults who are supposed to protect them. The path forward would continue to be challenging, but Lisa was committed to walking it, both as a police officer working for change from within the system and as a mother determined to create a safer world for all children.